Hi friends, hi, hello, how's it going? How you doing today? Hopefully today finds you well. Today, I'm super excited to do this video, but I'm thinking that I got in over my head. There's this video that's rolling around here on the YouTubes in which people randomize a number and they take every, such and such amount of number of palettes out of their collection, and then they come to you and they talk to you whether they would purchase that palette or not all over again. And I have so many palettes. In case you guys didn't know, like my inventory, I have approximately 200 palettes or so, and the number that was randomized was 4. So every fourth palette in my collection is pulled here, and there's so many more palettes here than I think should be. Maybe I have more palettes than 200. I'm not even sure. But with that said, I think that there's a lot of, like, I buy brands, certain brands. So there's like a few Natasha Denona in here. There's a few ABH in here. There's a few, because I also keep all the brands together, right? So I think I might be able to talk about each one of those palettes in conjunction with each other. Maybe. We'll see how this goes. But that is the video that we're doing today, and I'm super excited to talk to you about these palettes sitting in front of my face. With that said, for those of you new here, hi, my name is Donna. I'm a lover of all things high-end, colorful beauty and self-care. I also work in the beauty industry as a field leader for Ulta Beauty. I get a lot of education in my position. I like to bring you that education here on this platform. But I also just kind of like talk about makeup. So I'm assuming that if you're here, you also like to talk about makeup. This might be the channel for you. I really do think that you'll enjoy my channel here, and I have about 900 videos for you to choose from. So I'm sure that you'll find something that entertains you, and I hope that you'll want to subscribe before you go. With that said, let's roll into this would I repurchase this again kind of thought process with these palettes. What are we calling this? I don't even know. You know, you've seen it, but I don't even know what we're calling it at this point. All right, I've got so many dang palettes sitting in front of my face. We randomized number 4. I pulled every fourth palette out of my collection. There's a lot to go over, so I'm just kind of gonna jump in. We have actually a couple Morphe palettes here. This one is 35M Boss Mood, and this one is one of the giant, 35 pan eyeshadow palettes, and this one was actually a gift. I love it so much. The color story is just beautiful, and it will be one of the Morphe palettes that sticks around with me probably until the end of time, because I love the color story of it and because it was a gift. I wouldn't repurchase this. Morphe is just not a brand that I love. So this is one of the Morphe Jaclyn Hill Vault Collection eyeshadow palettes, and this one is in Ring the Alarm, which is the kind of like red and orange tone eyeshadow palette. I also wouldn't repurchase this because I feel like this color story is just overdone and overdone and overdone all over again in my collection. So if this was to come out today, there are 2 reasons why I wouldn't purchase it. And the next one I have is this, and this is by Alamar Cosmetics. This is the Reina del Caribe palette. This is volume 1, and I got it in a BoxyCharm. One of my first BoxyCharms, actually. And I love this palette, but this is a palette that for what's in it, I think is just really too expensive. And these shimmers specifically are just amazing. I haven't purchased any other palettes from that brand because these palettes are just so dang expensive. Even if I saw the swatches of these guys, I am not sure that I would ever purchase this because there's just nothing about this palette that stands out from any other palette on the market. And it's too expensive for the 8 shadows that you get, in my humble opinion. And, these days, there are better shimmer shadows than even what exists in that palette that I have in my collection. I only have one Tarte palette in here, and this is the Tarte Tarteist Pro. This is just the Amazonian Clay palette, just the regular Tarte palette. I think that it is beautiful, but I think in terms of like what I use today, would I repurchase this? And the answer would have to be no. This is mostly matte eyeshadows. Everything in here is a matte except for these 4 shades here. And while I appreciated that way back when, because I was only wearing matte eyeshadow looks, I need a brow bone highlight that might be shimmery. I need, you know, while I could get, you know, a good brow bone highlight out of this shade here, I would want a shimmer shade in my brow, and none of these would be able to do it for me. And to be stymied into this box with these 4 random eyeshadows that are the only shimmers in this palette that don't really go with everything, I would say this would be a no. And that would suck because this was my first Tarte palette and I loved the Tarte formula so much from this palette. Okay, I only have one Colored Rain eyeshadow palette in here, and it is this one, which is the Berry Cute eyeshadow palette. I do believe I got this in a mystery box that I purchased from them. Back then, didn't want this palette. Like, this was not the palette that I was hoping for in that mystery box. But today, I think it's a beautiful palette and I am a fan of their formula. I think I would probably want to purchase it today. The next one I have is the only Viseart palette that I have in here, and this one is the Petite Pro 5 Soleil, and it looks like this little tiny cute guy. And if I were to come across this palette today, would I want to purchase it? You know, I don't think I would. When I purchased this, was really into a rainbow eye look, a rainbow color story in a shadow palette, and I have a ton of rainbow now in my eyeshadow collection, and this one just would not be the one that I would pull for. There are 3 mattes in here, one here, this one here, and this one here, and I just think that it's not rationed proportionately enough for me to want to pick it up. And these guys are pretty expensive little tiny guys for what they are. The pans are minuscule and they're like $38 or something like that. And granted, you get 8 shades, but I just don't think that I would find myself in the market to pick that up again. The next 3 I have are actually from Juvia's Place, and the palettes that I have here are the Magic Mini by Juvia's Place, and then I also have the Tribe, and then I also have the Afrique. So this one I definitely wouldn't purchase again. It's too much primary for me. I do like a colorful eye look, but I don't love a primary eye look on me. Yes, you can blend the colors, but I don't do a whole lot of mixing and matching, you know, dumping my brush into all the different colors before I put it on my eye, because you can't get a consistent color out of that. So with that said, this is too primary for me, and I don't feel like the shimmers in here, there's 5. There's this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one. I don't feel like they necessarily go as well as I need them to with everything. I just think that this has a lot of opportunity to get muddy, and that's what I saw from it, a lot more than creativity. And I do have, I think, a palette roulette on every single one of these, so I'm going to link that series for you as well. This one I would purchase again. I think I love this color story. I love a good green eye. I love just how different it is, and this chartreuse is just truly beautiful. I really honestly kind of love this like poopy brown color too. I do think that it has enough that it draws your eye's attention to it still, and I wish that this was still available, because I would recommend it for anybody that's looking for a nice khaki looking eye look or a nice like grungy eye look. This is a perfect grungy color story in my humble opinion, and I would repurchase that. When I look at this, I say yeah. And you know why? Because that green is just drawing my eye to it. It's such a beautiful shade. But then I look around, and that's really the only color in here that is really drawing my attention to it. Knowing what I know that there are several beautiful eyeshadows in here that, yes, I would want this because I know that those beautiful eyeshadows exist in there. But not knowing that, would I pick this up again? Probably not. So then I also had this one from Winky Lux, and this is the Winky Lux Mermaid Kitten palette. I'm very much a completionist mindset, right? I got the kitten palette in a BoxyCharm, and then I saw this one at Ulta, and I'm like, oh, I should probably just pick up that one too because it's part of the kitten series. I really don't like that. I really don't think that this palette is amazing. There are some amazing shades in this palette, and yes, it performs really well, but I hate the color story of this guy. So at the end of the day, no, I wouldn't repurchase it. I don't even know what drew me into purchasing it in the first place. This is the Marc Jacobs Electric palette, and Marc Jacobs has an amazing formula. Really truly does. And if this palette was for sale again today, yes, I would repurchase it because it's just so beautiful. Like everything about it just screams pick me up and take me home. It's such a beautiful like pinky smoky eye palette, one that is really great for like a night out. Date night is immediately what I think of. Valentine's Day is immediately what I think of, and it's just so beautiful. These shimmers are just, I mean, they're so creamy and soft and gorgeous. And I think that you can do a lot with this as small as it is. And I love a small color story that you can do a lot with. And those are just such really pretty. I mean, right down to the packaging, they just look luxe. They feel luxe. The shadows feel luxe. I would repurchase that palette for sure. I don't have very much ColourPop in my collection, if I'm honest, but this is the My Little Pony palette by ColourPop. I didn't purchase this in the first place, and I have to be honest with you, I probably wouldn't give it a second glance except for the fact that it has My Little Ponies on the front of it. And at the end of the day, when I do my palette declutter, this may go, but it will go into my nostalgia drawer because I loved, as a kid, Barbie, Care Bears, My Little Pony, Hello Kitty. I love that it's got the ponies on it, but I would have never picked up this palette if it didn't come to me in a BoxyCharm, and I wouldn't pick it up today either. This one I just picked up, I think within the last year. So this one's an easy one for me. This is the Melt Cosmetics Smoke Sessions, and this is what it looks like. Even though it's not a 50-50 mix, even though there's only 2 mattes in here and the rest are shimmers, I would 100,000% repurchase this palette. These greens down here are stunning. These golds down here are also stunning. Like Melt does really, really good things to a shimmer. When they do their formula right, they do it right. This is one I would definitely repurchase. And the other thing that I pulled from Melt was these stacks. There are 2 stacks in here, but I have them quantified as 1 palette in my collection. I would never repurchase these stacks. These are, you know, everything that everybody talks about with the Melt formula and how inconsistent it is and fickle it is and how you have to finesse it and play really well with it and do certain little things and be very specific about how you put on an eye look. I find that to be true in these stacks more than anything else. And I have some pretty difficult palettes by Melt. I have the Muerte and the Vita, and those are pretty pigmented, pretty difficult palettes to work with sometimes. I do not like them at all. These ones, I probably won't get rid of them at the end of the day because I've got to keep everything Melt, in my humble opinion. But I have the Lovesick stack and the Gunmetal stack, and while I do think that each one of these stacks has some, you know, decent shimmers into them, the mattes are awful. So I would not repurchase. So the ones that I pulled from Huda were going to be the Desert Dusk palette, which is one of her big ones that she comes out with at Christmas time. And then I also pulled her Ruby Obsessions palette. I love the Obsession palettes, even though they're not always a cup of tea to deal with. This one specifically, I would say, was easier than a couple of the other ones that I have in my collection, but this red and this red here were kind of a beast. But I would repurchase this. I love reds on my eyes. I love that it's super compact. I love that it's kind of monochromatic. I love that you can get a variety of eye looks out of it, even though there's only 9 shades. What I don't love about it is that there's only 4 shimmers, but I think that, or I mean only 4 mattes, but I think that the 4 mattes really do work with the shimmers in the palette. I did not love the Desert Dust palette. So I found that a lot more of these shades were harder to work with than others, and some of them were just flat out duds. This shade here is probably going to go down in history as the worst eyeshadow in a palette in my collection. It's one that stands out to me every single time somebody tells me, talks about the Desert Dust palette. I'm like, oh, you guys know that shade Amethyst? Does it suck in your shadow palette too? Yeah, it sucks in mine. It is awful. It is so dry and chalky, and it's just hard to build up. It doesn't want to play well with anything. And also, I just really, really hate this glitter in here. So I have a few of the holiday palettes that she has, and those glitters in the pans don't bother me as much as this glitter in the pan does. It just goes everywhere in the palette. It's kind of a hot mess. I don't love this one. I don't love this one. And I'm glad I didn't stop at this one, because this was my very first Huda Beauty palette. I'm glad I didn't stop at that one, because I really do love Huda as a brand. The next one I have is this one. It's the only Ciate London palette that I have, and it is the Ciate Astrolites Jeweled. I love this palette. I had so much fun with this palette. It was super pigmented and it blended well. It played well with other shadows. It even has this like really kind of duochrome lavender shade that isn't really that much of a duochrome when you think about it in terms of what we have available to us today. I think if this palette was for sale today, I would probably get it, because it's really pretty, and it kind of sucks you in with how weird the pans are. But at the same time, I hate that about it. But I do think that it is a beautiful palette, and I would probably pick it up today. So this is the Nabla Cutie palette, and this one is in the shade Midnight. And Nabla is a brand that I just tried this year. I love this palette. I think it's gorgeous. It's pretty. Knowing what I know, would I pick it up today? No. But not knowing what I know, would I pick it up today? Probably. It's pretty. It was on my wish list for probably 5 months before I did pick it up. So it's one of those palettes that continue to resonate in my brain and just kind of make a home in there, and you know, sit on the couch and call it good for forever until I did pick it up. I brought it into my collection. I used it in palette roulette. I had some real severe problems with this deep dark blue in here, and it's the only damn matte in the palette. So I could earnestly say I would probably pick this up again, yes. But I could earnestly say I would probably be kicking my butt just as much as I am currently about having it in my collection. Is it a palette that I will declutter? Probably not, honestly, because when you do use these shadows, the eye look is always beautiful. I just know that I can't use this one, and I don't love this one. Yes, I would probably pick this up again. The next one is this one, and this is the Il Makiage Color Box Squad Multi-Dimension Color Quad. This came to my collection from an IPSY, and long story short, I believe that this is a beautiful palette. I do not believe that this is worth the money, and honestly, the quads just do not appeal to me very much. So would this be a palette that I would purchase? The answer would have to be a big resounding no for me, for multiple reasons. Number one, it's a quad. I don't typically purchase quads. I do have a couple that I've purchased myself. But number two, this is such a boring palette. This is such a boring palette. There's nothing in it that screams, buy me, to me. So no, I would not purchase this. The next one I have is this NARS one. This is the NARS Summer Unrated palette, and this is the, you know, the NARS Summer palette. They always do limited edition palettes, and this is what this guy looks like, and I did just pick this one up over the summer. So I have to earnestly say, like, my preferences have changed quite a bit in my makeup journey, but not much over the last couple months. So I still think that this is a beautiful palette. I still think that this screams my name to some extent, and I still probably would have picked it up and put it in my collection if I were looking at it today. The next one I have is this, and this is Nomad Cosmetics Berlin Untergrund. Now, this is also a palette that was brought into my collection from IPSY. And while I believe that it is, you know, a unique color story, I do not think that there's anything in this palette that would call my name. Now, Nomad has had other palettes in their collection that have called my name, but knowing what I know now about Nomad Cosmetics formula and how I feel about it, I could easily say none of their palettes would be something that I would want to put in my collection. I do think that they're a glorious formula. I do think that they have some really pretty shadows and really buildable, blendable shadows, but I also know that every matte in this palette is actually more of a satin, and I don't really 100% love satin eyeshadows, so I need a little bit of mix of everything, and all of their shadows just kind of flatline for me in that they're not too sparkly, but they're not too matte. They just kind of flatline for me. There is no oomph behind their eyeshadows. So it is a unique palette to my collection, but it's definitely not one that I would spend money on today. This is the Ace Beauté Classical Paradise palette, and I would absolutely purchase this again. And this is the old formula for Ace Beauté, but my God, their old formula is stunning. I understand that it was, you know, a little bit inconsistent, the old formula, but I love Ace Beauté as a brand. Their formulation is not bad, not even their old one. This is quite possibly my favorite Ace Beauté palette, and also quite possibly one of my very favorite in my collection, just because of the sheer fall grunginess of it. There's something about it that screams my name, and I would repurchase it for my collection for sure. So then I have a couple of BH Cosmetics palettes. The first one I have is this one, which is the Royal Affair, and this one I picked up at TJ Maxx, and I'm not quite certain why I picked it up in the first place. I think because it was $7 and I was having a in-the-moment love affair with BH Cosmetics. Happy to have it in my collection, but I would not repurchase it. Biggest reason why is because, again, like the Nomad Cosmetics palette, there's just nothing in this palette that screams by me. These two colors seem kind of really out of place in this palette, to be honest. And I just think that some of the shimmers in this palette really tend to look just alike. This whole row of shimmers here, and then these two here look just like that, those two rows, like, and the two colors that are just kind of out of place in this palette. I definitely wouldn't pick this up again. And then I had also the Avocado Toast. Now this one is a totally different story. This one fulfills all of my green eye look heart's desires to some extent. It's really hard to show you because it's all like, you know, holographic and whatnot, but I do believe that these are some of the best shadows that BH has ever put out. I love this palette. It's one of my favorites in my collection. I had a really great time using it in palette roulette, and I always think of it when I'm thinking of a green eyeshadow look. To be honest, it has perfect blending out colors, but it also has just perfect overall eyelid colors. So yes, I would repurchase that palette. I have two Pat McGrath palettes, and we'll start with the big one. The big one I have is the Midnight Sun. This one I had on my list for such a long time, and I finally did pull the trigger on it. And I do feel like if it were still on my list, that I would still want it as much as I wanted it when I pulled the trigger on it. It's just such a beautiful, unique palette. Again, it's got kind of those grungy tones over here, and then the 4 special shades. This one right here is especially beautiful, and that's really what, you know, draws people's attention to the pictures, the marketing pictures on Sephora or whatnot. But the other one is this one, which is a quad. I cannot remember what the quad name of this one is. If you know, put it down in the comments section. But this is a beautiful quad, and it's not special shades, but I do think there's 2 special shades in here. I cannot remember, but it is a beautiful, beautiful palette. While it's not a standalone palette, it is a beautiful, beautiful quad, and I would repurchase it for sure. I have one Kat Von D eyeshadow palette, and you know, I would repurchase this. Number one, look at the packaging. I am kind of a sucker for packaging. If you're not a sucker for packaging, you probably wouldn't purchase this because the inside is kind of crazy sauce, right? And I saw this reimagined a couple of times. I kind of go back and forth with this one. I do think that it's one that I love having in my collection today, but I also think that it's probably one that I would not purchase today. I don't mind the formula, so it's not like a formula thing, and even so, I'm not even sure that this should be based on the formulation, because right, I've never owned this palette. If it were out there today, would I still look at it and want it? Probably not. Honestly, I'm going to say no on that one because I just don't think that I would. I have 2 Urban Decay palettes, one being the Prince eyeshadow palette and one being the Moondust palette. And, you know, yes, 100 times yes. These are beautiful toppers that have a little bit of opacity to them and a little bit of base to them, and they're just so pretty. And I even have a topper or a Moondust shadow single, so I know that I recently have purchased, so I know that I would want that Moondust eyeshadow palette. This Prince one, I'm also going to say yes, but if you know, you know, I kind of just love Prince. So this is not, this of the 2 palettes was the favorite color story for me. I'm not a big fan of the Urban Decay eyeshadow formula, so I didn't purchase it for any other reason other than it was Prince, and it is also one of the only palettes in my collection that still remains in its box. At some point, I will probably take it out and put it into my, you know, my drawer of palettes for nostalgic reasons, but for now, this is where it's at. This one would be a no. You guys, the Too Faced Gingerbread Extra Spicy was actually a palette that my daughter talked me into purchasing when we saw it at TJ Maxx. I am peer pressured into purchasing stupid stuff sometimes, and this was one of those things. Like, my oldest daughter thought it was beautiful and glorious, and I would enjoy it so much, and I just don't love Too Faced as a brand. This one is just not awesome. I just don't love it, and I kind of also hate the tin packaging. I know a lot of people love it. I am an anomaly out here. I do not love it. All right, next. Yes, 100 times, yes, I would repurchase this. This Club Nebula palette is gorgeous, screams buy me to anybody, I feel like. You can get a good neutral eye out of it, well, light eye out of this. You can get a good deep eye out. I just love it. I just love it so much. So, yes, absolutely would repurchase this, hands down. Violet Voss Fruit Sorbet Fun Size Palette. Do you believe I purchased from IPSY? No. No, I would not repurchase this from IPSY. Again, I used to be really into rainbow. I have probably about 100,000 rainbow palettes in my collection. I do love the Violet Voss formula, but this is not a palette that I needed then, and it's certainly not a palette that I remember to use now. It may be one that goes into a declutter now that I'm thinking of it. Be Perfect, Dream Big, Manifest palette. You guys, I like this palette. It is a beautiful palette, but that's about as far as this goes. I didn't love this palette. I didn't love working with this palette. And while this certainly drew my attention when I purchased it, I think a year ago at this point. I just see a lot of different shades, and I really like a smaller eyeshadow palette. Like 15 pans of eyeshadow is pretty perfect for me. Would I purchase it again today? I don't think it would draw my attention enough. It's just too big. It's just too big. Same can be said for this one. I didn't realize I had 3 Morphe palettes on here. This palette, you know, today I would look at this and go, no thank you. That's the most boring thing I've ever seen in my life. Back then, it was so exciting, right? I stand by what I said about Morphe earlier, so I'm just going to go with no. I wouldn't repurchase this. I have this one from Dominique Cosmetics. This is the Berries and Cream palette, and I cannot tell you how long this sat in my loves list at Sephora before I purchased it, because this used to be available at Sephora. And truth be told, I would probably still repurchase this because it is just so pretty. But I am really disappointed in the Dominique Cosmetics formula. I don't love it. So I have 2 Lunar Beauty palettes, and I have the Moonspell and the Life's a Drag. This is the Life's a Drag, you guys. This was my first Lunar Beauty palette. This was Lunar Beauty's first palette. And, you know, he came out with Facelift, and I didn't purchase it, and I have to be honest, I probably wouldn't purchase this one if he came out with it today. I love this palette, but I just don't think that it is glorious enough that it would catch my eye. I love that it's got like brights on one side and neutrals on another, and then just 2 shimmers in here, but I do love a lot more than 2 shimmers in an eyeshadow palette, so that in and of itself would be something that stopped me from purchasing it. But also, it just doesn't have anything about it that screams my name. But this one I definitely would. The packaging alone draws me in. Again, kind of a packaging snob. And then when you open it up and you look at the colors, if this were out today, I would purchase it. If I did not have this in my collection and this came out, I would want to purchase it, yes. Then we have ABH. I had 4 different palettes that got pulled just from my ABH collection. One of which being the Norvina collection volume 3. This is the one that has the like the fall color story. And if I'm honest, yes, I would repurchase this again. I have looked at many of these Norvina collection palettes and thought I need to purchase those too because of the collectionist or the completionist mindset that I have about some things. But this one for sure would be one that I would purchase again just because of the sheer color story of it. Even though when I look at it today, I can see all different shades of brown in here and not as beautifully colorful as I thought it was when I first initially purchased it. But I do think that this would draw me in and I would want to purchase it again. And then we have these guys here, Sultry, Norvina, and Modern Renaissance. Modern Renaissance is probably the oldest palette in my collection at this point. I know that you can't see it real well, but it is really, really loved. It's really, really used in my collection. I would not purchase this again. It's far too light toned on the one side, and this side just doesn't give me enough pops of anything that I feel like I need. And again, I go back to I really these days like a kind of a 50-50 or a 60-40 or 70-30 even minimum kind of mindset when it comes to ratio of shimmers to mattes, and this has 2 shimmers in it. So no, I would not repurchase this. This one would be closer to being repurchased. I do think I might repurchase this one because it's got those cool tones in it that I'm kind of into these days. And it's also got a 50-50 mix of shimmers to mattes. So I do think that this one would probably get a side eye from me and it would be looked at again, and I would probably purchase this one. The Sultry, I don't know, you guys. I do think that I would want it, but I think that I would want it I don't think I'd purchase it. The only reason why I picked up this palette was for the sheer completionist mindset. I do love it, and I am happy to have it in my collection. It's a perfect neutral palette to have in any collection. I'm happy to have it, but I don't think that I'd pick it up today. So then we go to Natasha Denona. There are 5 here that I pulled every 4th freaking palette. And the first one is this one. This is Ayana, and it is one that came in a BoxyCharm to my mom, so it was a gifted to me from my mom. I would purchase this palette. This is beautiful. This is a beautiful 5-pan eyeshadow palette, and this isn't her like minis. This is her full-size eyeshadow pans, the 0.08 ounces of eyeshadow in each pan. It's a beautiful, cool, toned, kind of khaki eyeshadow palette with kind of a pop of pink in here. It's just so pretty, and when I look at it, I am automatically taken to a place where I can see myself doing multiple eye looks with this. So yes, I would repurchase that. Retro, this is one of my favorites, so this would definitely be a yes. This is my updated, more present, more relevant version of ABH Modern Renaissance in my collection, in my humble opinion, and it's also a much better formula in my humble opinion, so this would be a yes also. This one, Trio Chrome, it would be a yes. I love this palette. I feel like I should just say yes to everything, but I kind of go back and forth with gold. I am not sure that I would purchase this. It's beautiful, but man, I'm just not sure that I would purchase it. It's got way too many browns. I don't even know why I purchased it in the first place. I think this color calls to me, and this one here calls to me, but the rest of it just looks very blah to me. It is a beautiful palette, and even though it looks very blah, there is a lot of variance in this palette. You just don't know that until you use it and pick it up and play with it. I don't think that I'd pick this up. And the last one I have is the Natasha Denona Purple Blue. And while I want to say, yes, I would pick this up again. This is a damn expensive eyeshadow palette. This is like a $230 eyeshadow palette. Would I pick it up again if it were out today? And it is. If I didn't have it in my collection, would I pick it up today? Sadly, I'm going to say yes. I know how long this sat on my wish list before I pulled the trigger on it. And I know that if I hadn't pulled the trigger on it then, it would still be on my wish list. So I know I would pick this up. I would like to just say that I am changing my mind on this one, because I do think that, knowing me, that green and that green would draw me in. And because I know Natasha Denona's formula, and because I know the mindset I sit in now about Natasha Denona, I do think that I would pick this up. So then we go 23-23, and that's exactly 50-50, and I think that is interesting. Have you guys done these videos? I would be interested to watch yours, and what do you think? I know I had a ton of videos. How about you guys pick the next number and don't make it a 4 or an 8, because I picked every 4th palette in my collection. Well, with that said too, I'm going to have to go through and write down each one of these palettes, because I don't want them to show up again in one of these. I don't know how I'm going to go about doing this again, because I don't know that each one of these will get into the same place they were in when I pulled them, because I have too many palettes. Is this something you'd like to see again? I would love to do it again. I've seen it going around. It's a lot of fun. It really is, just thinking about what you would and would not do with your collection if you had the opportunity to do it again today. I'm working on some more collection videos. I will be decluttering palettes very, very soon. I'm hoping to have palettes, highlights, and blushes all done this month so that I can get them up either this month or next month, so that they're done by the end of the year, so that I'm not holding on to them any longer when we go into inventory time frame. Please let me know what you guys thought of this video. I would be interested to hear from you in the comments section. And with that said, I hope that you guys are all doing awesome, that you had a great day, that you are loving each other, but loving each other from afar. And until next time, I hope that you will subscribe, hit that notification bell, hit the thumbs up. I love you guys so much. I'm so happy that you guys are here with me today, and I hope that your November is treating you kindly. Thank you so much for joining me today, and until next time. Bye, friends.